Okay, so I think that we are ready to start at the same time that I will continue let participants to going into the session. Thank you very much all for joining us today to our workshop 3. I know that all of you are working very hard, and last week it was very intense with 2 workshops. So I hope that this week is a little bit more relaxed and everybody is on track. So my name is Carmen Mateos. I'm part of the Create Apps Championship team. So I just wanted to welcome you all and say thank you very much for joining us today. As always, these workshops are mandatory for all the teams selected to be part of the high potential team. But this doesn't mean that the full team needs to attend. Most important is at least one of you, and the ideal case will be the person in charge of the app development attend to this session. If the rest of the team want to join, of course, they are more than welcome. And always the sessions are recorded, so you can watch the recording after that. Just before we kick off, I just wanted to go through the housekeeping rule. Please keep your mic mute, but it doesn't mean that you cannot participate. It's just to avoid any background sound. If you want to participate, please do and ask questions. You only have to raise your hand, and the tech team will hand over to you to ask your questions. So also the chat is open. So please feel free to write your questions on the chat. If you don't want to interrupt or you think that you're going to disturb the flow of the session, please, you can use also the chat. Always at the end, we have a Q&A session. So it's also a good moment if there is something that you need a little bit of clarification or you want to take a note, that is also a perfect time to ask your questions. What next is please respect the space, respect questions others are doing, and respect the facilitators. As advice or suggestion, please join from your PC or laptop. We will be sharing some links on the chat, and it will be easier for you to join those links through the computer, as well as you will need your phone close to you. So please keep it handy, because you will have to scan some QR codes, because we will love to hear from you and get your input in some exercise that we have prepared. And last but not least, please don't forget to rename yourself in Zoom. We will appreciate if you can put your name / your app name. That is a way that will help to the team to keep the track and check you in as attendee of the session. So please, everyone that I can see here, some of you like Amal, Dina, Uthaifa, I'm not pointing fingers, but please rename yourself. Okay, so that's it. Without any, I don't want to take more of the time of the tech team. Please, Tuang and Suresh, you are is the team that will be with us today. So the floor is yours, and I hope that you enjoy all the session. Thank you.
Thanks, Carmen. So today it'll mainly be me and Suresh facilitating the sessions. So could you go to the next slide? And so right now we are in week 2 with workshop 3. So we have a new milestone will be unlocked, and there's a submission upcoming. But just before we go ahead with everything, can I get a thumbs up or a yes in the chat for everyone who's booked their one-to-ones for this week? Because honestly, I had a fun time last week with all of y'all. Just getting to know your ideas and everything. And obviously, this week will be a bit more in depth. So just a thumbs up. All right, I see lots of people. All right, that's nice, Dina. So okay, so right, that's good. That's good. All right, from Strange as well. I see. I think most of you all have booked the sessions, so it'll be nice to meet you all this week as well, so that we can get a bit more in depth about everything. So, as I mentioned, we are currently in week 2. We're done with week 0 and week 1. So today we are in the third workshop, and we'll be unlocking new milestones once the session is done. So on to the next one. So these are the upcoming weeks. So we'll get more in depth with these as the coming weeks. So next one. So today's workshop. So today, what we'll mainly be doing is understanding app development from idea to app. and the technical architecture, core concepts, and the part production. So what we'll mainly be doing for this week is just get a brief understanding of how do we go from, all right, so we all have thoughts and a rough idea on what to do, but how do we actually bring this idea to reality? So that's what we'll be covering today. On to the next one. So before we get into all the technical jazz, I would like us to do a small icebreaker. I want you to get out your phones and just quickly scan this QR code when you and just answer the question. When you hear the word app development, what feels most confusing? So just take out your QR phones and then scan the QR code. I'll give you all a minute before we go. Mm, So I want you all to submit your answers, and I think minutes. Can we go ahead? Just minutes. So all right. So based off what I've seen already, you mentioned front end, app security, building, technology, validating, develop, and coding. Obviously, coding, this is a senior trend. Lots of people, when you're not coming from an IT background, when you hear the word coding, kind of get overwhelmed, but you don't have to worry about that. So what today's session will actually show you is with the modern AI technologies, you technically don't have to worry about coding as much as you did before. So we'll be getting more in depth to it, so don't worry. So app security, yes, this is an important part, and it can get a bit confusing, but don't worry about that as well. Technology building front end. Actually, from my personal view, I actually don't. I also kind of find front end confusing, even though I've worked for many years. Like I rather prefer back end, but yeah, front end is mainly in regards to the UI. So yeah. All right, then can we go to the next one? It's good. It's good. These are good answers, by the way. So, what are the main objectives this week's workshop? So, first we'll begin with the autonomy of an app. So, basically understanding the general lingo, what is front end, back end, APIs, what's databases, and basically just the keywords in development, if I were to say. And then we'll be moving on to a bit more track specific workflow. So basically on what is low code, what is no code, and what is full code. Basically the difference between the types of building an application. Because there are multiple methods, especially with AI. There's so many ways you can build an app. So we'll be discussing on each particular way and which is best fit for you personally. So afterwards, we'll be moving on to Firebase, a deep dive. So I think just to get a raise of hands or just a thumbs up, how many of you have heard of the word Firebase? Just thumbs up. All right, Bahar, that's nice. Ahmed, all right. Oh, so there's, yeah, so lots of you all have heard. So just to give you all right, Reem as well. So the Firebase is like this extremely, really good serverless platform by Google. So it's actually really helpful when it comes to authentication and data storage. So we'll go a bit more deep into it, but this is one of our key objectives for this week. Oh, Bahar, you did some work with Firebase. Oh, that's good to hear. That's really good to hear. And afterwards, we'll be moving into AI acceleration, basically getting to know which AI tools we can use to kind of fast track all the work because we are in an accelerator and time is key. So AI is one of the biggest revolutionary technologies in recent years, and it can actually help us accelerate the process a lot more. So we'll be getting more into how you can use AI to develop faster, and then we'll be coming on to the publication. So basically, how to publish or navigate through the Google console and the App Store timelines, and then basically how it works. So I would now like to hand it over to Suresh, who will get a bit more technical and give you the ins and outs on all of these points you just covered. Suresh, I think you can go ahead.
Hi. What's up, everyone? I hope you all are having a great days along with the Accelerator program, as well as I believe all of you are working on your products. So last week when I had conversations with y'all at the mentoring sessions, I saw some really interesting concepts and really interesting products that are coming up. And yeah, it's really great to see everything, all the effort that y'all are putting towards the development of your POCs as well as the products. All right. So before I begin, can I see a raise of hands? See a raise of thumbs up. Those who are ready to get started with the development. All right. I see a couple of people. Great. So today we're gonna be discussing about the development tech stack as well as how we could get things started. So I know we have a very diverse audience here. I understand that there are intermediates, there are beginners, there are advanced people. So I'm trying to make this workshop in a way that it suits the entire audience who are here. So in case if you feel like you need clarification, if you need any sort of a guidance, clarification on some of the content, feel free to raise your hands and you can use chat as well and interact with me. I'm ready to clarify any doubts that you all are facing with regard to development tech stack as well as the development way forward. All right, so let's start the session. So I like to talk about this same restaurant example that I discussed a couple of weeks ago, right? So it was actually, I believe you all can remember that I mentioned that me and my co-founder went to a restaurant to discuss the product idea, right? It was a random occasion. And then I mentioned that we actually took a napkin and drew the whole architecture and we somehow got it started. So that's how it all began. But moving forward from that idea to what we are doing right now, I want to take you all towards the kitchen side of it, right? So now, when we sat down at the restaurant, right, we had to place the order, right? So, there are a lot of staff who are working in the restaurant. There are kitchen staff, there are waiters, there are cashiers, there are multiple stakeholders who are part of the restaurant. So, what I'm trying to say here is basically, we can assume if you take your application as a restaurant, we can distribute the different types of tasks we have in the application to different parts of a restaurant, right? Just imagine your application has a front end. So front end is basically the visual component that any user would see. For an example, if you're accessing a website, if you're accessing an application, it's the front end that we all always see, right? We are interacting with the front end. We are clicking the buttons. We are scrolling through the list. We are interacting with different sorts of UI components. That's the front end, right? So if I tally this situation with the restaurant scenario, I could say the waiter is going to be the front end of the restaurant. Why is that? Because we are interacting with the waiter, right? So usually when you go to the restaurant, we have to mention the order to the waiter itself. So whenever the waiter gets the order, they go to the cashier, right? They place the whatever the order through their POS systems. So after that, what they do is they go to the kitchen staff to mention the order and to get it prepared. So basically, it's like this. So we can say the backend is going to be the kitchen, right? So basically all the preparing stuff, like preparing the food item, preparing the presentation of the food is completely happening at the kitchen. So we can say that as the backend. And then we have the front end. So then we have the database. For an example, where the information is being stored, right? So we can assume, let's say we are interacting with the reader first of all, and then the backend, which has all the information is there in the backend, which is basically the kitchen. So the waiter's responsibility is to bring the food from the backend to the front end, right? The main reason is that we can't directly go to the kitchen and ask the kitchen staff to give me the order, right? It's waiter's job, right? So there has to be some sort of a transport layer. So we call the transport layer as an application programming interface, right? So we have multiple components here. We have the front end, we have the back end, we have the database, and we have the API. So as I mentioned earlier, front end is the representation layer of all your information. And then you have the back end, which is more like the logic, right? For an example, let's say you are building an application that has a login page, right? So the moment you enter the password in the front end, moment you enter the credentials in the front end, it should be processed. So what happens in the backend is that it's going to check your username and password combination. It's going to check whether your account is valid or not, right? So all of these things are going to be checked on the backend side, basically. And the action processing part, basically. And then finally, we have the database. So this is where all your information is at, right? So for an example, if I go back to the login behavior, right? There has to be a place where our information is stored at. For an example, the moment I sign up for application, my data has to be stored somewhere. So we call it as the database. This is where all our information is at, right? So in databases, we have different types of technologies. For an example, I have mentioned here Firebase, MySQL, and there are some other database technologies. So let's deep dive into all of these things when you're discussing more about it. First of all, let's talk about the different types of technologies that we can use to build these sort of applications for no code, low code, and full code. So if I talk about the front end, um, for no code stack, there are a lot of drag and drop components. So if you are a beginner to coding, if you are a beginner to programming, don't worry about it. For front-end development, there are a lot of UI-based front-end builders. That means we can drag and drop the components and we can work with the components and we can integrate with it in a very easy way. So we'll discuss about what sort of applications and what sort of frameworks do we have in terms of building these sort of front ends in a drag and drop way. But if you are a full coder, let's say if you got some programming expertise, building applications and coding for a long time, yes, we had a full code track. There are multiple technologies. For an example, from building applications, we have something called React Native. So right now, the technology is developed in a way that we don't have to spend much time on building this sort of a coding multiple platforms. Because right now we have a technology called cross-platform application development, right? So for an example, if you have heard of React Native and if you have heard of Flutter, so these sort of frameworks do support the development of the same application for multiple platforms using the same code base. So that's a really great advantage that we have in terms of the cross-platform application development frameworks. And then we have the most basic web development technologies, which is the core fundamental of everything, which is the HTML and CSS. That's also a great way, and that's a fundamental of everything. That's a great grandfather of all of the technologies that we have in the market. So moving to the backend side, right, the brain of it. So in terms of the brain, there are multiple technologies that we can use to build a backend. For an example, one of the most popular frameworks that is there in the market right now is that Node.js, right? So Node.js is more like like I mentioned, HTML being the great grandfather of the front end side. Node.js is going to be the great grandfather of the backend side, right? Because right now, most of the frameworks, including some of the front end frameworks and including some of the backend frameworks, are written in Node.js. That's going to be the highest level of parency, right? For an example, if you've heard of this library called Nest.js, that's also a really great backend framework that a lot of people can use and build their backend applications. And there's something called, Vue.js, right? And there's something called Next.js. It's a full stack application development technology. So all of these things are actually based on Node.js, right? So they're inheriting the behaviors of Node.js in all of these frameworks. And then we have something called Python. So a lot of people, I think, even a beginner would get started with Python because Python is actually very easy to use as well as very easy to maintain also in terms of the scalability, in terms of the integratability. Because right now we are living in the era of AI, right? A lot of people are developing AI functionalities also. So in case if someone is planning on having some sort of AI agent built, having some sort of AI capability added to your application, Python would be one of the perfect programming languages that anyone could master and anyone could easily adapt, basically. So a lot of people have this misconception thinking that Python is not a scalable solution, but it is a scalable platform. Because right now, 80% of the industry of AI is being written with Python. So that's there. And then we have something called serverless functions, right? So, building a backend could be very complicated sometimes, right? Sometimes it's going to consume a lot of resources, a lot of hardware resources, a lot of software resources. Sometimes even there's going to be a lot of operations that has to be deployed. But a lot of companies, for an example, AWS, Google, and Microsoft, they have come up with their own set of technologies to make our lives easier of building backends. So it's called serverless functions. For an example, just imagine you need a simple function to send an email, right? In that way, what we can do is basically we can build a dedicated function to send the email and deploy that in one of the managed services. For an example, in AWS, there's something called AWS Lambda. If you take Google Cloud, there's something called Google Cloud Functions, right? So these sort of services can be used if you want to deploy individual functions that would be highly scalable as well. So you don't have to worry about the scalability because Google and Amazon, Microsoft is going to take care of the scalability part for you. So you don't have to worry about the scalability, right? So all what you have to think of in the scalable options is that how am I going to define the logic? How am I going to define the business logic? So that's going to be the core part you all need to focus on when you're writing serverless functions. So that's a must to have. So see, these sort of large scale corporates are making the life easier for you. Right. So moving to the database layer, this is where our data lives. So like I mentioned earlier, we have different types of databases. So we have something called, in terms of the low-code databases, let me share a great tool. There's something called Airtable, right? So Airtable is one of the greatest data visualizations and data representation platforms that you all can use. So even a low-code person can easily spin up an Airtable database, and they can store the information very easily. And also you can have third-party integrations also with their APIs, with their extensions, with their connectors, and it supports a lot of use cases. If you want to try out some sort of a visual database that would be low code, Airtable is going to be the go-to option that you can use. If you're a technical person, yes, we have multiple other options as well. For an example, if you take Firebase and SQL, those are some technical databases. So we'll talk about Firebase later on at the session itself. And then we have two other database types, which is the MySQL and which is the PostgreSQL. So in MySQL and Postgres, both of these database technologies are actually relational databases, which means we can have table representations, right? We can have tables, we can have entity relationships, and we can have one-to-many, one-to-one, many-to-many, right? Those sort of relations can be there. So when to use something like MySQL, when to use something like Firebase is a question that comes to us. So a lot of people are asking me this question: how do we choose the perfect database? So it's not something that we should actually answer based on the most popular technology, right? It's a technology, it's a decision that we have to make based on the based on the application that you're building, basically. Just imagine you guys are building a ticketing platform, right? In a ticketing platform, the number of tickets are going to be scaled up very rapidly. But if you take the user's information, the user's details, and user's purchases, and user's personal information, those sort of data is going to be, static, mostly static, right? Based on the user's count, it will grow. But the issue is, sometimes you need to use this information for analytical purposes. Sometimes you need to use this data for different sort of reporting, and maybe for having some sort of combinations between different types of data, of relational data. So in that case, we might have to go for a relational database for storing the information of the users. But imagine the type of data for tickets, right? So for a single event, it's going to have, sometimes thousands of tickets, sometimes it's going to be, depends on the event, it's going to have a massive number of tickets, right? So the tickets information, even though it supports storing in a relational database, someone would argue, why aren't we storing the ticket date information in a relational database instead of there are multiple other options as well, right? We can store at a MongoDB database, at a Firebase database, right? I think that's going to be the perfect option here, right? So whatever the scalable data that I would say, if it's tickets, if it's something like messages, right? If you're building a chat application, I would say this sort of information is going to grow exponentially. So whatever the information that's going to grow exponentially can be stored in a NoSQL database rather than storing in a relational database. Because in terms of the processing power, in terms of the memory usage, we can actually save by storing in a non-relational database because we are only it's something to do with the data, the volume of the data, right? So we should think of the architectural decision as well when you're choosing the perfect database for you all. So it's not always the trend that we had to look at. It's always the architectural decision and the way that we look at these sort of technologies in an architectural way. And then we have something called APIs. So APIs, like I mentioned earlier, it's more like a standard interface that brings you the data from backend to front end, right? So for an example, I know that we all are from different countries, but we all speak one language here, which is English, right? So just like that, there could be different front-end technologies, there could be different back-end technologies, and there could be different database technologies as well. So in that case, there has to be a single source of communication mechanism or a communication medium that supports the communication between multiple technologies. For an example, if you take front-end and back-end, even though it's written with different types of technologies, there has to be a common ground where the front end and back end can talk to each other. So that's why we have something called APIs, or we can call it as the application programming interface, right? So usually the APIs are written, in multiple languages, but communication is done with using a standard called JSON, right? So that's going to be the standard of API communication. Right. So now let's
Suresh,
talk about,
there's a
yes,
question in the chat.
sure. All right, let me. All right, so we have two questions. Um, First question is Firebase is categorized in the database instead of the backend. Yeah, this is a great question, right? So Firebase is a collection of multiple services. So Firebase has their database services. So they have two types of database. There's something called Firestore, and there's something called Firebase real-time database. It's a low-code database actually, right? So we can do the integrations very easily without having a backend as well. And also, we can use Firebase as a backend also because Firebase provides multiple backend services. For an example, like I mentioned, Firebase provides you the Firebase Cloud Functions, and also it provides you multiple other services. So anyway, we have a separate slide deck to discuss the capabilities of Firebase. So I would say Firebase is more like a platform, right? So Firebase has, like I mentioned, Firebase is a database service also. It's a really great platform we can look at and we can scale our applications on top of Firebase as well. So let's talk about it at the end. The second question, is there a database iOS developers prefers? All right. So it's like this basically. So iOS, there's no specific database for iOS, but still, like I mentioned, databases like Firebase and Superbase, they're supporting iOS integration also because they have their SDKs rolled out for both iOS and Android. And even if you take some sort of a cross-platform, they have the support for any of these cross platforms. There's no limitation. So I would say Firebase is a good option for iOS. Superbase is there. And apart from that, we have MySQL, MongoDB. So it's all about understanding the type of the nature of the application and applying whatever the most appropriate database, depending on what sort of information you are storing and what sort of a frequency the information is being stored and what sort of scalability you're expecting. So it's an architectural decision we should make based on the type of the application. So if you could specify what sort of application you're building in the chat, I can definitely, all right, okay. iOS favors security highly, which is why iOS is 9. All right. Yes, exactly. So anyways, for an example, if it's a healthcare kind of application, if it's some sort of a fintech application, we really have to think of the security aspect of it. So I would say if it's HIPAA compliant, if it's FHIR compliant, I would say these sort of databases are anyway providing encryption as well. So even Superbase has a database that provides you HIPAA compliant databases also. So depending on the application type, we can go with whatever the database. So like I mentioned, we should think of the encryption side also. What sort of information are we going to store as plain text, and what sort of information are we going to store as encrypted? So that's a question, that's a decision that falls upon us. All right, so let me continue. Right. So now let's talk about the no-code architecture, right? So we mentioned about some of the high code and full code technologies. Now let's talk about the no-code architecture. So no-code architecture is all about, building the applications in a visually appealing interface, or we can call it as a visual interface where we can, drag and drop and build the application, build certain components, elements, right? Things like that. So it's more like a visual interface. So we have three concepts to understand. All right, before I move forward, can I see a raise of hands or thumbs ups? Those who are under no code track. No one? Anyone who's using no code technologies? Any drag and drop UI builders? All right, so we have one person. Okay. All right, okay. So three main concepts, right? Like I mentioned, in no-code tracks, we have a concept called data binding and logic and the sealing, right? So data binding is more like, so the front-end building part is already sorted, right? For an example, using a drag and drop UI builder, we can build a visually appealing interface. That's not an issue, right? So we can just drag and drop elements, just like you design something using like MS Paint or Photoshop, we can just drag and drop the elements and build the UI. The most interesting part is going to be the data binding. So data binding means how are we going to assign data to the interface that you have built so far. For an example, just imagine you are building a news app, right? So the news app would have multiple elements. For an example, it could have the banners, it could have the lists, it could have the images, right? There could be multiple elements of a news app. But without data, the application wouldn't be perfect. The application wouldn't be completed. So that's why we need to have some sort of data binding. So data binding is the process of allocating the data, assigning the data to your UI element. So that's the process of called data binding. And then the second thing is actually the logic, right? So I believe the three concepts does not apply only for no code as well. It applies to, it's a fundamental of programming anyway. It's a fundamental of building applications. So even if you take the full code applications, this applies indirectly as well. So the second thing is all about logic. So how does it trigger the action? For an example, just imagine, so now you have a complete UI with real data, right? So just imagine you have built the news application with real information that is coming from the internet, right? So we have everything in hand. And now what it should do basically? For an example, just imagine you have a button. Once you click on it, it should open the news detail of that. So that's going to be the logic of that, right? A behavior. So we should have the behaviors done as well. For an example, what should happen once you click on a button? What should happen once you click on image? So those sort of behaviors can be, can be done using the logic operators. And then we have the ceiling, understanding limitations. What is that, right? So I would say the limitations applies to anything, right? Even if you take the publication, even if you take some sort of application development with full code, hybrid, right? The limitations applies anywhere. So if you take these sort of complex loops, heavy custom logic or hardware access may require different track, right? See, sometimes you might have to think of that in in reality, right? So if you choose low code track, if you choose no code track, can we complete the intended features within the limitations that we have in the platform? For an example, if you take a no code platform like Adolo, it's a really great platform, but there are certain limitations. So we'll talk about some of the limitations when you're discussing about the platform demonstration, right? So the moment we discuss about a no-code application or a no-code framework, we should think of their limitations. Can I achieve this particular functionality if I use this? Can I achieve this particular behavior or data source if I use something like Adalo? So it totally depends on whatever you want to pick, and the choice of the technology that you want to work with, basically. Sometimes there could be hardware limitations also. Sometimes Adalo might not allow you to work with different types of hardware, different types of system specifications. So you might have to choose the right appropriate technology when you're doing something like this. All right. So now let's see. I was mentioning something called Adalo, right, all the time. Let's see Adalo in real life. So Adalo is actually a no-code application builder that we can sign up very easily like this. Let me go to the site, and from here, you can create your free account, right? So you can see there's an option called build free. So from here, you can sign up for a free account, and you can sign up and you can start using it. But let me remind you of the pricing also. So Adalo has the free account as well as they have the paid accounts. So what's the difference between the free account and the paid account? So if you take the free account, it completely provides you the functionality, the features to build an application. No issue, no limitations. But if you want to convert that into APK file, you might find a difficulty because they don't allow for creating the APK files. It doesn't allow you to export the APK file to be uploaded to a app store. But if you want to try out their functionalities and the features, I would recommend Adalo is a great place that you can use a free account to try out the applications, to try out their features, to try out whether that suits your application or the POC. It's completely free. But if you're satisfied with the output that you get from Adalo, yes, completely fine. You can switch into a paid account based on the features and based on the functionalities that you all wanted. You all can switch to a paid account like starter or professional and go with it, right? So let me show you how we could easily work with Adalo. So I'm going to log into my existing account. Right. This is what I was talking about, right? So you can see it's a restaurant application. It's a cafe application. So like I mentioned earlier, we can drag and drop items and we can build the interface basically. So let me show you a small sample. So if I want to add a button, I can just drag and drop like this, right? If I want to customize the layout, yes, I can. I have all the options to customize everything, right? So you can see you can change the colors, you can change the text, right? You can add any sort of behaviors or actions. See, for an example, if you want to add a click event or to link with something else, yes. So you can do all of these things with Adalo, right? Because it provides you the visual editor to proceed with anything like this, and then you can build a perfect application with all the interactions that you can do with Adalo. So feel free to try it out. Right. So apart from the UI building, so let me show you some of the components they have, some of the visual elements they have. So they have all sort of navigation elements. They have a list. They have buttons. They have forms, right? So there are a wide range of UI elements that you all can use to build your application, build the user interface. It's already there. And then, like I mentioned previously, the data binding part, in case if you want to link your application with a data source, maybe a database, maybe an external data source, yes, we have something called database collections. From here, we can actually link your application with the databases and we can bring real data into your application. So that sort of things can be done with the database access right from here. And also you can see all your screens here and you can see the interactions also with these arrows, right? So in case if you want to, see this application in real life without paying, you can actually click on this option saying view web, and then you can actually use the web view to access the features, and you can do a small run through of the features just to validate it, right? So they have this online preview that you can use to build a simple application and try out, right? Let me show you one more thing, right? So I discussed about Adalo, right? And there's another great platform called Flutterflow. So Flutterflow is not just a low-code platform, so you can use it in multiple ways. You can use Flutterflow as a low-code platform as well as a hybrid platform. So which means it supports both ways. You can use code as well. You can use no low code as well, right? So it's a great platform. So Flutterflow also offers you a drag and drop application builder. So you can simply use the UI components and build a great UI. So I would say if you're focusing on the UI element of it, the UI aspect of that, Flutterflow can be a great platform where you all can work with any of these elements and build a eye-catching UI for your application. So let me show you some of the screens I have built so that you all can have understanding on what sort of capabilities we have, right? See, so these are some of the interfaces you can use and you can build with Flutterflow. Let me clarify one more thing as well. So Flutterflow is actually not Flutter, right? Flutter and Flutterflow is two different things. But anyway, Flutterflow is using Flutter programming language to add the functionalities. For an example, just imagine you want to add a functionality for your user interface, right? So you can use Flutter code to add those functionalities to your Flutterflow application. But again, Flutter SDK is a separate thing, right? So you can set up Flutter SDK separately in your application, in your machine, and you can build it separately as well with full code approach. But like I mentioned, Flutterflow supports hybrid. You can entirely use the UI builder and build the application, or you can use Flutter to bringing some functionalities, to bringing some real functionalities to application to make it interactable with anything, right? So keep that in mind. All right, so let's go back to our slide deck. Right. Let's see if I gotten any questions so far. All right. Okay, so let's talk about the Flutterflow model, right? So I just gave a very brief introduction to what Flutterflow is and what sort of things we could do with Flutterflow. And let's see what are the main elements we have gotten, right? So we have something called the widget, right? So if you take the concept of Flutter, they have the components are known as the widgets, right? So there are two types of widgets. There's something called stateful widget, and there's something called stateless widget, right? And there are multiple types of other widgets as well. For an example, you have the columns, you have rows, you have containers, you have text, right? So for an example, if you want to build the layout, yes, we have the layout widgets. For an example, column, row, container. So these are the layout widgets we have. And then if you want to add some interactivity, if you want to add some functionality to your application, yes, we have the text widgets, we have the image widgets, we have list views, there are so many other components, there are so many other elements. Let me show you a few, right? So it's right here. So you can just go to this section called widget palette, and you can see all of their widgets are here, right? See, these are the layout widgets, and these are the base elements, and these are the page elements, forms, right? So all of these types of widgets are here. So in case if you want to build the application in a visually appealing way, don't worry, everything is here, right on Flutterflow. You all can use it. Right. So what is state management? Just imagine you have built an application. Let me talk about something like Instagram, right? So I believe all of you have seen this application called Instagram, which is one of the most popular social media, right? So in Instagram, the moment you log in, the moment you make a small interaction, you might have seen sometimes so you might have seen, right? The moment you log in, it will persist your user state, right? Second time when you open the application, it won't ask you to re-log in. It's going to maintain the state of the application, right? And let's say when you're inside the application, right, you might have seen the change of different pages. And the moment you come back to the home page, the default date won't be gone, right? The state will be maintained through the whole journey, the user journey of the application. Sometimes the different types of interactions we do, will persist, right? So we have something called state management. So in Flutter also we have something called setState function that we can use to change the state of different elements, different components, different widgets, right? So that's all possible with state management functionalities that these sort of platforms are providing us. And for React Native also, we have something called Redux. It's a really great framework to work with state management. Redux framework can be used to work with React and React Native both. So it's a really great state manager if you're looking at using for different types of applications. And finally, we have the custom functions. So custom functions are there. So in case if you will want to add some behavior, if you want to add some sort of a application level behavior, maybe some API calls, maybe some database calls, maybe some sort of logic. Yes, you are free to use. The custom functions are there. Those are really great, as well as, we can do any sort of customizations that supports you the best. Right. Let me show you the coding aspect of Flutter Flow, right? So now you have seen the layout of it, the interface of it. So if you want to add some custom code, any sort of custom functionalities, we have option called coding mode, right? There's something called developer menu. Once you toggle that, it gives you option which says view code, right? So from the view code, it gives us the ability to update the application's code and add any sort of custom behaviors, right? So you can see the layout code is there. So in case if you want to add any sort of functionality, any sort of logic, any sort of, any other customization that you would prefer, you are free to, change any of these codes and modify that and, add the custom functionality that you wanted. So that's why I meant Flutterflow is a hybrid platform that offers the low code way as well as the full code way as well. So it allows you, it's more like a cross between two platforms together. Right. Now let's talk about the full code architecture. So before I talk about it, can I see if you have gotten any questions? Okay, so there's a question. All right, not yet so far. All right, so if there's any questions, like I mentioned earlier, feel free to use the chat section. You can even raise your hands on Zoom and interrupt me and ask if there's any questions. I'm happy to help if there's anything that you want to clarify.
I have a question.
Sure.
So for Flutter, we can use Flutter Flow for Flutter. What tool we can use for React Native similar to Flutter Flow?
All right. So your question is on for Flutter, we have Flutter Flow. For React Native, do you have any? That's the question, right?
Yes. Do you have something similar?
For React Native, there's no specific one, but at the end of the session, I'll show you an AI-based tool that you all can use to build React Native applications very easily. But Flutter, I don't think there's any similar platform available that you can use to build React Native applications in drag and drop way. But there are AI code builders. I'll talk about it at the end. So yeah.
Which better to use, React Native or Flutter?
All right. So again, it depends on the type of application. For an example, if you're looking at the UI element of it, I would say Flutter has a higher advantage for UI designing, right? Because it has the widget trees and it has different UI components and component libraries that we can use to build the UI. And also, if you take Figma, the one I showed you last week to design the layouts, Figma supports Figma code into Flutter conversion. So if you consider about the UI element, if you consider about designing visually appealing UIs, I would say Flutter has a great advantage over React or React Native as well. But if you're looking at the functionality, if you're intermediate who can code well, and if you can, do the element design properly by hand manually, I would say React Native would be a great option. So for an example, if you take applications like Facebook, applications like Instagram, those are built with React Native. Right. Did I answer your question fully?
Yes, thank you so much.
All right, no worries. So the next question is on is Flutterflow cross-platform compatible? Is there a specific backend platform that goes best with it or not? Right, great question. So definitely, yes, Flutterflow is cross-platform compatible. So they have support for both Android and iOS. Let me show you that. So you can publish the application in either platform, iOS or Android as well. And talking about the backend platform, Flutterflow supports Firebase integration directly because they are using Firebase as the main backend for the application. So if you're looking at that particular part, yes, it supports the cross-platform. But you need to get the paid version. So I don't think their free version supports iOS publication. So you need to anyway get the paid version for it. If you want to, publish for both iOS as well. So these are the platforms it supports. So you can see it supports Android, iOS, Flutter Web, macOS, Windows, and Linux. So it supports all of these platforms. So you can try and you can get it published. Yeah. All right. So full code. So this is where I think most of you are at right now. So I would believe a lot of people are choosing full code application development track because of the flexibility that we have. Yes, I completely agree. Full code provides you the full flexibility to work with any technology, to work with any library, any API. But I would say, so now that we are in Accelerator, when I'm choosing full code, always think about the capability that you all have to implement within 45 days, right? Because full code is going to take some additional time to build it. But don't worry, right now we are living in the era of AI. There are a lot of AI coders. We have Cloud Code, we have Gemini CLI, we have Firebase Studio, we have Laravel, and there are so many other AI code builders, even supports full code development. But if you don't have a proper understanding about the full code architecture, I would recommend going ahead with either no code or low code would be a great choice. But if you have some sort of programming expertise, if you have a programming background, if you know what it does, yes, it's completely okay to, it's completely fine to choose a full code architecture so that whenever something goes wrong, you know what to fix, right? All right, so we have another question. Can you build AI features or infrastructure using Dart itself in Flutter as a backend? Or is it highly recommend to have some backend coding language you mentioned earlier inside the app? Great question. So, so Google has launched this tool called, let me show you that. It's called Firebase GenKit. So Google has launched this tool called Firebase GenKit. It's actually an generative AI platform that comes under the Firebase platform that supports Flutter integration also. So if you search for Firebase GenKit Flutter, they have generative AI support. Let me show you the documentation. It's right here. All right, this is there's the library. So you can see it supports multiple platforms, including JavaScript, Flutter, React Native, right? So depends on whatever the platform that you are using, you all can integrate a generative AI capability, maybe generate text, maybe a chatbot, maybe a voice bot, right? So those sort of things can be done if you use a GenKit platform with Firebase. So that supports Flutter integration also. Yes, that's completely fine. Right. So we are not okay. The question is about that dot. Okay. Yeah. All right. But here's the thing, there could be limitations, right? So this is all about generative AI. This is all about AI agents. But if you're looking at any sort of a complex AI scenario, maybe some sort of a complex classification models or image models or vision models, in that case, GenKit wouldn't be sufficient. So in that case, you might have to go for something like a managed AI environment, maybe something to do with TensorFlow, PyTorch, or any sort of other technology framework as well. But I would say for a simple AI scenario, to build a simple AI agent or a chat agent or a voice agent or some sort of agentic behavior within your application, yes, GenKit would be one of the perfect solutions that Google offers you. All right, no worries. So yeah, so let's talk about the full code now. Right. So with full code, like I mentioned, we have the 100% flexibility. There's no limitations at all, right? We can do it almost anything, right? Whatever you name it, we can do anything, but you have to make sure that you are having the pre-experience with programming if you are touching the part of full code. Right. So in terms of the project structure and the architecture, right, we have different types of folders that we usually work with because it's always advisable to make our code reusable. Just imagine you are working with a development team right now, and the team leaves on next year, and then you have to hire a new set of developers, right? So that's going to be the life cycle of a software company as well. People leave and people come. It depends all based on the project and based on the company. There could be instances. But whatever happens, our project has to survive throughout a long period of time. So that's when we should have a proper coding architecture, a proper coding standard to make sure our application would not end up being depreciated, right? So that's why we need to have some solid coding standards when you're working with a full code architecture. We need to have a proper architecture, a proper separation of code, things like that. We have to think of it. So what is component? So if you take React Native, if you take React, right, the smallest part of the application can be known as a component, which means it can be reusable in multiple places. Even if it's a backend, even if it's a Flutter application, we can break our application into smaller parts, right? So that we can reuse some of the parts in multiple places. And the moment you change a component at one place, it should change in all the places, right? Just imagine you have a website with 50 pages, right? It's a simple HTML website with 50 pages, but it's not reusable. Just imagine the moment the year changes, right? You had to update the copyright, which is there in the footer, right? So it might say copyright C 2025 or 2026. The moment you step into the next year, the copyright has to be changed. So in that case, what would happen if you have 50 pages, right? You have to change the copyright year in 50 places, 50 different places. So that's going to be a very complex process. So I would not advise to make your application like that. Make it reusable. So if you have a footer element, if you have a footer component, which is shared between all the pages, it's only one place that you have to change so that all the pages will be updated. The moment the year changes, you only have to change only one place. So it is a very basic example, but there are very advanced concepts as well. There's something called props. There's something called state of the components. There are so many other concepts with regard to making the application reusable, but I would advise to maintain a scalable and reusable application so that it's going to benefit you all in the long run. Right. So then you have assets. This is where we store the static components. For an example, if you take images, if you take JavaScript files, if you take, let's say, JavaScript files, CSS files, this is where we store the static elements, basically. Yeah, not the code, the static logos and all, right? And then if you have any sort of utilities, we store that in the utility folder. So that's how the overall architecture is going to look like when it comes to generic application with full stack, full code architecture, basically. Right. So now we have something called environmental setup. So which is basically the development environment. So there are a lot of environments basically. There's something called Node.js environment, Watchman, Cocoa Pods, Gradle, right? So to build your application, the developers has built a lot of environments, right? Maybe for package management, maybe for additional skill addition, right? For things like that. There are different environment setups basically, right? So we can use these environments to maintain the packages or the dependencies. Just imagine you're working with a plain programming language, right? You want to add some additional capabilities. Let's say you're building an Node.js application but there's no capabilities. If you want to add some third-party capabilities, we have this library called npm node package manager, right? So we can incorporate that sort of package manager to our application, and we can incorporate any of these third-party behaviors which is there in the npm library. Let me show you the npm library. So if you search for npm node package manager, you can see there are thousands of packages here. Just imagine you want to have some sort of a AI component or AI capability in your application. So you can just search for Google AI, right? Or generative AI. So you can search for whatever the package that you wanted. Just imagine you want to have a map in your application. So you can just search a map right here, and then you can find whatever the map component right here from the npm library. So there are thousands of packages that you can use to incorporate within your application. So you can bring in third-party skills from npm library to your Node.js application. So make sure npm only supports Node.js, but for other libraries also there are other options. For an example, if you're looking at Flutter library, there's something called Flutter Pub. So this is the Flutter library. So you can actually explore the Flutter library, the pub library, if you want to add some additional capabilities to your Flutter application. So that is there. And also Gradle has another library also, and Maven also having another library. So there are multiple third-party libraries if you want to have some sort of additional capabilities to your application. Feel free to use any of these libraries so that you can add some additional capabilities to your application basically. Right. So the next is that state management. So like I mentioned earlier, if you want to maintain the state of the application, like I mentioned in the previous example, there are multiple state management frameworks. For an example, for React Native, there's something called Redux framework that we can use. And also for Flutter, also there are some other there are so many other libraries that we can use to maintain the state of Flutter also. Yeah, so those things are there. And finally, version control. So version controlling is really important. So version controlling is not all about, releasing different versions of your application. It's all about how you make sure the application would be reversible whenever there's a mistake, whenever there's a, uh, whenever there's any sort of issue we are facing basically. So if you use something like GitHub, so GitHub is actually one of the best source control platforms that I can introduce y'all. And there's another one called Bitbucket. So using this sort of version control applications like GitHub and Bitbucket, we can make sure our application won't lose any sort of a change, right? So the most importance of GitHub and Bitbucket is that we can maintain a version history. For an example, the moment you make a change of code, it will track on GitHub. The moment you make a small feature, it will track on GitHub. The moment you fix a bug on GitHub, it will track on GitHub, right? So every single change you make in the application or the backend can be tracked on top of the GitHub platform or the Bitbucket platform. So in case if you make a small mistake, let's say you are making a code mistake or a code error, you can revert it back to a previous edition, a previous version, and get the current version, right? So especially if you are beginners to programming, right? In the future, you all might be working with different scalable teams, right? So in that case, we can't work alone. So GitHub can be a great platform that teams can collaborate and teams can contribute to your code, and teams can build scalable applications while resolving their coding conflicts. That sort of platform, which is GitHub. So I would recommend, even if you're an individual who's competing in this competition, don't worry. Even if you're a beginner, try to set up a GitHub account and try to have a proper versioning of your application. Every single change, every single update you make to your application has to be tracked by using something like GitHub. So that's going to be the way forward when you're building scalable applications, basically. Right. So we'll go for a break. Before that, I'll answer the two questions we have received in the chat. Then we'll break. We'll go for a quick break, and I'll hand it over to the committee. to take over. Right. So we have two questions. Can you build AI features or okay, I already answered that. So the next question is, what would be your advice for us as a must-have pre-launch preparation for GitHub or GitHub Actions at this stage? Yes, that's a great question. So I would say, I believe all of you want to grow your business as a startup, right? Or a company or a corporate. I would say, first of all, as a starting point, create a GitHub organization, right? So GitHub has something called GitHub organizations that you can create. So within an organization, you can have multiple GitHub repos, right? And also you can invite multiple people to a GitHub organization to maintain your application. So you can have multiple repositories, not an issue. You can have one repo for backend, another repo for mobile application, another one for any sort of AI components. So you can have multiple repositories. So from day one itself, make sure you get your developers to commit into those repos. So whatever the changes they make, whatever the changes they do, they have to commit that. And to address your second concern about the GitHub Actions at this stage, I would say starting off with a proper CI/CD pipeline would be a great advantage. Just imagine you are building a full code application, right? So in that case, what's going to happen is basically sometimes we work with different teams, right? Maybe one member is working on maybe one member is working on some sort of a backend, another one is working on the front end, another one is working on AI component. So in that case, what they can do is basically make sure when they have some sort of CI/CD pipeline or auto deployment pipeline enabled, the integration that's going to happen at the end of the development won't be that much complicated because you already have a solid pipeline in the hand, right? So it's all about delivering the features right on the spot. The moment you develop something on the back end, you can deploy that. The moment you develop something on the front end, you can deploy that. And right on the spot, you can do the integrations also. So there won't be any sort of integration gaps, which is going to be there at the end of the development. So I would say from day one itself, I really encourage all of you to set up the GitHub organizations, GitHub pipelines, CI/CD pipelines, so that you won't face any sort of a difficulties, you won't face any sort of a complications at the end of the development, so that you can maintain a sync from the day one itself. All right, so the next question. All right, so this is to all the participants. I would really appreciate if you all can raise your hands when you're asking a question, so we can hear your voices as well. So I want it to be interactive as much as possible. So feel free to raise your hands, and we can clarify the questions right on the spot. And yeah, I really appreciate the questions that you're asking. I think those are really valuable questions, and thanks for asking the questions once again. All right, so we have another question. What if we want to integrate Google Gemini or other third-party AI tools into our applications? How do we do it in the most efficient way? All right, great question. So it's like this. So we have the easy way and we have the hard way, right? So I'll talk about both ways. I'll talk about the easy way and hard way, the both sides, right? Talking about the easy way, I would say you can use something like Firebase GenKit, which is going to be the most easiest option to integrate AI into your application. So it supports Gemini, it supports any sort of other LLMs as well. If you want to have a very basic agentic capability to your application, yes, that's possible. So you can straight away have the integration with your application, whether if it's done with Flutter or React Native or any sort of other technology. So that is given. The hard way is that you can choose a standard agentic framework. So there are a lot of agentic frameworks. For an example, if you take the Google's ADK, the Agent Development Kit, which is going to be one of the best agentic frameworks that you all can use, and you all can have integration with something like Python Flask or something like that. You can expose the API and you can call the API from the application. So that's another way. And talking about more frameworks, so we have something called LangGraph, which is one of the agentic frameworks of LangChain. And then we have something called Agno framework. It's a really powerful framework to build lightweight AI agents. And there's something called Crew AI, and there's something called Autogen from Microsoft. So these are the different types of agentic frameworks we have in the market. So if you're choosing the hard way, the difficult way, I would say go with the agentic framework. But it's not that difficult as you think, right? Because right now, building an agent is not that difficult. But if you're a beginner, I would want you to do a little bit of research on these frameworks and find the difficulty, because their documentations will provide you a really comprehensive knowledge on building these sort of agentic applications. It's not that difficult though. But yeah, you can give it a try anyways. So the previous question, how can we make sure images designed by any designer don't change on the app? How can we make sure the images designed by any designer? Okay, the clarification is the size and resolution of images change according. All right, perfect. That's a great question. So I know I think the question is all about the different types of DPI, the ratios, I would say, right? For an example, let's say if we have a smaller screen, if we have bigger screen, if it's a tab, right? So we might have different types of screen resolutions, mobile screens, tab resolutions, maybe desktop layouts. So how do you make sure we build the application, or how do you make sure the designer's images would not look like cropped images? So I think that's a question. Can I get a small confirmation? Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, you're correct.
All right, great. So I would recommend if you're designing any sort of graphic elements, I would say always go with the SVG format, the vector graphic format, because vector graphics wouldn't have any sort of collapsing. For an example, it won't scale down based on screen resolution. So I would say always go with vector graphics, SVG formats. So you can make sure the graphic won't be scaled down. And if you take Flutter, they have different types of scaling modes. For an example, they have something called cover. They have something called fit to screen. They have something called fixed resolution, right? So they have different types of resolution types if you take a Flutter application. So even if you take a React Native application, you can use a standard CSS styling modes. If you want to make sure the image won't look in a bad way. So you can apply the CSS, the default image sizing mechanisms to make it look still. But I would recommend when the designer is designing an image, always design it as an SVG file so that it will remain the same.
Is it an
Did I answer? Did I answer your question?
Yeah, what you mentioned now, is it an application, or what kind of program or website or what?
All right. So the question is on what sort of programs we can use to make this SVG. So
Yeah, what you explained now, or what you have demonstrated, or let's say what kind of is it? Is that a program? Is it a website? Is it because the application is full code, we're using native like Java or Swift, or so it's not Flutter, but images don't remain as the designer already designed these images. They change, as I mentioned. You mentioned some programs or applications or websites. So because I'm not aware of what.
yes, sure. All right. So if you want to make the scalable images, so even if you take Figma, they support the SVG exporting mode in multiple resolutions. If you can even export with, let's say, 6x resolution, 5x, 3x. So there are multiple resolutions they support. So you can actually try the Figma's exporting of the multiple exporting options they have. So SVG, yeah. So I think thanks, Arij, for mentioning that as well. So it's a extension of the image. it's a format of the image. It's not like JPG, it's something like JPG or PNG, but it's a scalable image that won't scale down when you zoom in. So that's something I like them basically. Hope I answered the question.
Great, thank you.
All right. All right. So we'll come to the next questions after a short break. Over to you, Tuan, to take over.
That's right. So we'll take a 5 minute break. There'll be time on the screen. Meet you in 5 minutes then, guys. Just refreshing.
Hi Suresh, can I share my screen so I can show you the timer?
Sure, sure.
All right then, guys, welcome back. Suresh, can we go ahead?
Hi. Welcome back. Welcome back, everyone, after the short break. So, so now we are going to look at what sort of things we could do with Firebase. So we mentioned earlier as well. So what is Firebase and what sort of things we could do? And I want to, uncover certain misconceptions that you might think of Firebase as well. All right. So what is Firebase, right? So Firebase is actually one of the greatest platforms, greatest low-code platform that I can mention. It can be used in multiple ways. If I say low-code, I might be wrong. I would say it supports multiple modes of usage. So it supports sometimes it could be low code, sometimes it could be full code, sometimes you can do very complex scenarios as well. I recently saw an article on LinkedIn which says some app developer is using Firebase as the backend for a application that has over 10 million of users, right? So a lot of people think that Firebase is MEP level or a application or a platform to be used for only for building mockups or MEPs. It's not the case, right? Firebase can be a great, a very scalable platform if you use in the right way, right? So you all should know how to use it in the perfect manner, right? So that's going to be the use case. So I'm going to talk about the proper use cases of Firebase. I'm going to show you a small demonstration on what we could do. So let's see. All right. So first of all, I'll talk about some of the best use cases of Firebase. So one thing is the authentication. So like I mentioned earlier as well, in case if you want to have some sort of a Google login or a Facebook login, or let's say let's say any sort of social login, Firebase has an option where we can easily integrate social logins into application. So for an example, even if it's a email password authentication, even if it's a mobile authentication with OTP code, Firebase do support the authentication mechanism as well. And then we have something called Firebase storage. So in case if you want to store any information, in case if you want to store any data, on Firebase, let's say images or any sort of user's personal data or any sort of documents or personal data or anything like that. Firebase do support storing of static information and static files on top of their scalable database platform. And then we have Firebase database. So like I mentioned, there are two types of Firebase databases. We have something called Firebase Firestore, and there's another one called Firebase real-time database, right? So Firestore is actually a really scalable database, but you can store documents as collections. And then we have Firebase real-time database. So if you want to have some sort of real-time interactions, for an example, let's say you have some data that would change on real-time basis, right? And if you want to automatically subscribe into their changes in real time, I would say Firebase real-time database would be one of the perfect solutions that anyone could use to integrate with the application. So let me talk about a small use case of Firebase real-time database. So a couple of years ago, I built a Firebase, I built a small application, a simple application for cricket scoring, right? So there's going to be a backend, some people updates, and then the users, the end users are there. So whenever whenever the admins are updating the backend, the users has to receive their score updates, right? So that sort of things can be done with Firebase real-time database. So that's why I mentioned we have two types of databases on Firebase: Firebase real-time database and the Firebase normal database, which is known as the Firestore. Now, let's see how we can use that, right? So before that, let me talk about some of the benefits of using Firebase Firestore. Like I mentioned again, like I mentioned before, it supports any platform integration, whether if it's React Native, whether if it's Flutter, whether if it's web. It supports multi-platform integration that anyone could use and integrate with the application. So that is there. And yeah, let's see how we could use Firebase. Right. So we have this is how the Firebase is there. Firebase platform is there. So you can actually go to Google and search for Firebase, and you will see something like this. And click on that, and you will see something called Go to Console, right? So it's in the top right corner. Once you click on that, it will take you to the Firebase console. So from here, you can actually create a free project, right? So you can create a project, you can enter a name, and you can give it a location, right? So right now my limit is so let me show you something which is already there. So I'm going to open one of my previous projects. So you can see this is how the platform looks like, right? So under this, all of the services are here. So if I go to authentication, you can see all the authentication mechanisms are there, right? So if you want to enable a particular authentication mechanism, you can do anything like this. So you can enable Google Auth, Facebook Auth, Apple authentication, GitHub, Twitter, Microsoft, right? So anything like that. So even if you require some sort of mobile phone verification with OTP code, you can enable that also. So there are multiple authentication mechanisms if you want to have these sort of mechanisms. Yes, it's very easy to integrate with any sort of application. And then we have Firestore. So like I mentioned earlier, this is going to be the storage, the data storage of Firebase. So let me clarify one more thing. So storage of files and storage of data is different, right? File storage is called Firebase storage, and data store is called Firebase Firestore. It's two different things, so don't mix it up. So whenever you want to store any sort of data, like text information, you can use Firestore to save your information. So you can create a collection, you can add a document, you can add the fields, right? So you can store the information of your application, of the users, in a structured manner if you use something like Firestore. And also you can set the protection rules as well. So whenever you want to have a data protection guidelines or any sort of rules to allow to disable writing, right? So you can set it up over here, and also you can set up a backup policy, right? So all of these things are possible with Firebase Firestore database. Let me show you the other database I mentioned, which is the real-time database. So you can see there's another option called Firebase real-time database. Sorry, not this. It's under the databases. It's called real-time database. So you can see this is the real-time database. So from here, you can actually create your own data schema as a key value pair, right? So in case if you want to have any sort of real-time capabilities to your application, maybe real-time score updates, maybe real-time information updates, right? So things like that, you can use Firebase real-time database to get it done. All right, so the most interesting part, let me get to it, right? Firebase has two different things. Firebase has a really powerful analytics tool. It's called Firebase Analytics as well as Firebase Real-Time Analytics, right? So that offers you a really comprehensive set of analytics tools. So you can see how are the users interacting with the application. You can see your demographics. You can see their devices, their events, right? So all of these things can be done. So I would recommend, so those who are almost at the end of the completion of your application, I would recommend for you all to have some sort of a analytics tool integration done as at the beginning itself. So whenever you're going live with your placed up application, for this, especially for the ones who are done with your application development, right? I would recommend have some sort of analytics tool integrated. So in that way, you can keep a track of the user's behavior from the day one itself. That's going to be very much useful when you're scaling up. The main reason is that you have the data, right? You know where they're coming from. You know where what are the devices they're using. You know what are the sections of the application they're using, right? So all of these analytical tools can be done with Firebase real-time analytics as well as Firebase analytics. So those things are supported. So feel free to use it as well. And then we have something called Firebase GenKit. It's the AI platform I mentioned. If you want to have any sort of a low code generative AI capability, maybe any sort of agentic capability to your application, you can use the Firebase GenKit to get it done. It's pretty good. Feel free to use it and see. And there are so many capabilities for images, for text, for code generation, even for audio models. they support multiple things, so you all can try it out and see. All right, so let me take a couple of more questions as well. All right, let's see. All right, so we have a couple of other questions. Okay, it seems that Firebase is great option. We are currently using Superbase, and how this is comparable to Firebase. All right, okay, great question. So it's like two different scenarios, right? Superbase is actually a powerful Postgres-enabled database, right? So let me clarify this. Postgres is also another database type you're using. Firebase doesn't offer you a direct Postgres database, but they have option called Firebase Data Connect, right? Let's say if you wanted to have a Postgres connectivity with your Firebase database, I would say Firebase has this option called Firebase Data Connect, which is a Postgres connector to your database, basically, right? So as an alternative, you can use this if you wanted to have a Superbase alternative, because if you like the Postgres behaviors of your application, you would actually you can switch to the Firebase Data Connect, and you can bring in your own Postgres database, Postgres SQL database through Firebase. That's a great option. So I would say Firebase offers you a wide range of features when compared to Superbase. But in terms of storing structured information, I would say Superbase has some little bit of advantage over Firebase. But I would say still comparing all the features, comparing all the benefits of Firebase and Superbase, I would say Firebase is going to be the top if you compare both together. I'm not being biased about a platform, but I'm just demonstrating what sort of capabilities we have. In terms of the pros of Firebase, we have all of these features, including Postgres. If you take Superbase, we have the relational database features that supports you a lot. So you can try and see what suits you the most. And also Superbase supports you the authentication also. So you can actually, try it out with both and see what suits you the most. All right, so the next question, do we need to mention explicitly that we are using analytical tool in our privacy policy? Yes, you had to mention because whenever you are submitting the application to Google Play or Apple App Store, they're asking this question called whether you have any sort of analytical tools. Yes, we had to provide the guidance. We had to provide the way that we store the information, but we had to mention that because when it comes to analytics, we're not storing any sort of PII. We're not storing any sort of personal information in our analytics tool. It's only the metadata, right? So we don't have to worry about that much. But anyway, we had to declare that we are using any sort of analytical tools and what are the tools we are defining, what are the tools we are using. We had to mention that in the guideline. The next question is, do we need to be on the Blaze plan for analytics? Right. Okay. So good question. So anyway, with the free plan also, they are offering you some sort of a basic capabilities of Firebase. But if you switch to Blaze plan, they're offering you more capabilities. For an example, if you take the storage also, they're offering you more space, and there are more advantages. Even for analytics, they are unlocking more advantages with Blaze plan. So it's not that expensive though. So you can actually find out the pricing of Firebase right here. Let me show you that. So yeah, so you can actually see the pricing of Firebase right here. So they offer multiple services, including authentication, and you can see the limitations between the Blaze plan and the free plan right here. So there are a lot of advantages with the paid option, but yeah, feel free to do a small comparison and see. All right, the next question. Another question regarding Firebase and Superbase, which one is cost effective? I would say in terms of the storage, Superbase is going to be cost effective in terms of storage. But if you take the database, I would say Firebase is cost effective. So it's a trade-off anyways, right? So I think Superbase offers you somewhere around 5 GB of data. If I'm not mistaken, I believe they're offering you somewhere around 5 GB of storage. But Firebase has their paid tier for storage actually. So you might have to choose wisely depending on the requirement and depending on the information that you would want to store wherever. Right. Okay. So let me move forward with the presentation. All right. So now we discuss about a lot of things, right? We discuss about the low code stacks, the full code stacks, and the hybrid stacks, and a lot of things. How do you develop your applications very fast with AI? So now we know we are living in the world of AI, right? There are a lot of AI coding tools like Claude Code, and there's something called Copilot, and there are many other coding techniques. There are code generators. So how do you do it? So for coders, I would recommend there are really great IDEs. There's something called Cursor. Cursor is one of the most powerful IDEs that you all can use. It's a VS Code alternative that you all can use to build your applications. It's a paid IDE, by the way. You have to pay a subscription fee to get the service, but it's a really great, it's a powerful IDE that you all can use to build your applications. And then we have something called Copilot. So if you are a VS Code person, there's something called Copilot, as you can see here. You can choose the model, right? So if you're using the paid version of Copilot, you will see all the premium options right here, right? So you can see the Claude Opus, Claude Sonnet, the latest versions of it. So you can choose one of these models and use it as AI code assistant. And also there's something called Claude Code, right? Claude Code is one of the most popular AI coding platforms that can be used. It's not Claude Sonnet or something like this, which comes with Copilot. It's a separate platform. So you can even run Claude Code on your IDE also. I think it's somewhere around $25 or $30 per month, I guess. And then for low coders, I would say there are multiple techniques. You can actually generate SQL queries with LLMs like Gemini and ChatGPT. And also, if you want to generate any sort of images or media for your application, you can use Midjourney daily. And also you can use Gemini also. So now Gemini supports image generation, and you can even generate logos, images, clip arts, or anything like that with Gemini. It's for everyone. And UI generation. So there are a lot of UI generation tools available. So there's something called V0. Let me show you that. So V0 is one of the best UI generators I have been through. This is one of the greatest UI generators. As you can see, you can just give the instruction over here, and it'll do the UI part for you. And also we have something called Figma AI. So that came up very recently. So Figma AI can be used to automatically generate UIs by prompt itself. So you can give the prompt and you can generate the UIs. So you can try out that also. And also apart from that, I think I mentioned this in the last week's meeting, in the last week's session also, there are tools that you can convert the Figma designs into code itself. There's a plugin called Figma to code, right? So if you have that plugin installed with Figma, that helps you to convert your application into coded applications, right? To convert the Figma design into a coded application. So you can try all of these tools, Figma AI, and also we have V0 and things like that. So apart from that, there are some other tools that I can recommend. Those are really good. There's something called Firebase Studio. Firebase Studio is not Firebase, it's something else. It's a different product of the Firebase platform. It's a vibe coding application builder that you all can use to build applications. So you can just describe the application over here, and then it will generate. So let me show you a sample application I made last week. So I just gave a very basic prompt over here, and then it generated this. Let me show you the application. This is the application, right? So by using a simple prompt, I was able to, come up with this application, and it does a pretty good job actually. See, it adds you the item to the cart, and you can check out, right? So without having any sort of real payment, it does a decent job, right? So you can even customize it. So you can even give more prompts, and you can ask the AI to customize this application. So these sort of applications are there. So you all can actually try these sort of techniques. You all can try Firebase Studio. You can try V0. You can try Figma AI, right? So all of these things are there for you. You can try out. And out of all of these, my favorite tool is Cloud Code, right? You all can try it out. All right, so I'll hand over the session to Tuan. Tuan, are you there?
Yes.
Tuan has a small demonstration to show all of you, because I know that there are a lot of people who are building web applications that you'll want to convert this into mobile applications. So Tuan has a small demonstration to show all of you. So Tuan, yeah, over to you.
Thanks, Raj. Let me just share my screen. Right, yeah. So I think we've all heard of this tool called Lovable. Can I get any thumbs up if you heard of Lovable? Yeah. Thumbs up. Yes. All right. So basically, for anyone who does not know what Lovable is, it's basically a website or a low-code platform that allows us to generate prototypes or websites and publish them just by using simple prompts. So, for example, take when you generate an app or to be specific, website recommends um, so basically then what it would do is generate as based off my prompt. So in order to save some time, just a second. Right, so then it'll begin developing the application here. So, but in order to save some time, I've already generated a similar application here. So what basically happens is in Lovable, not only does it generate the website for you, it also publishes it. So we can take that particular link here. Just give me a second. Here we publish site. All right, yeah. So we can just go here and view the app. You can see. So the moment you just click on the link, it'll take you to this website. So as I think as many of you all mentioned, you all have already made like websites for your applications or for your idea. But the issue is, as we need to release a mobile app, lots of you all had concerns on how maybe instead of starting from scratch, how we could kind of convert this. So this is one way. So if we have already published your application, whether it be a custom domain or just on Vercel, what you can easily do is, as Suresh showed earlier, there's this platform called Flutterflow. So what you can do is you can come here and just search under widgets. There's this widget called Web View. So this, if you drag and drop it here, it basically allows us to display or show a website inside the mobile app itself. Just it here. And as you can see here, the exact website that you saw here is now displayed as a mobile site. And if I were to just go to review mode, so obviously you can adjust all the UIs here. So basically it doesn't have to just be this. We can maybe put a navbar or just any other stuff. You can obviously customize as much as you want, but the basis of it is you can just use this drag and drop component called web view, add your published website link and convert it to a mobile app. So once this loads, so as you can see here, you can see the mobile app is right here. So then you can just use it as normal, as you can see here, and it gives you roughly the same result as before. So you can see here, if you scroll down, yeah, it's the same thing as this. This basically what it allows us to do is convert our existing website into an application under 5 minutes at most. So this is ideal for people who already have applications, basically web apps already developed. But there is one caveat with this approach is that if you do this and you do get the APK file or whatever to publish it, you unfortunately cannot go forward with this publication in the Apple App Store, as it's Apple kind of needs native features to be existent in any app to be published in the App Store. So if you are going with a web wrapper type of approach, you will obviously have to stick to the Google Play Store. So before you do go ahead with this, do keep that in mind. So if you have basically, if you have the motive of going to the App Store, you will have to make a new application. But if you have an existing website and you want to focus on the Google Play Store, this is the best way forward, which is just to use Flutterflow and use the WebView component. All right, so I think I can hand it over to Suresh. I think you can go ahead with the rest of the presentation.
Hi, Tuan. That was really insightful. I would say a lot of people will be benefited because at the sessions also I've noticed that a lot of people have built the applications using web views. So I believe Tuan's demonstration will really help a lot of people to convert the existing applications into Flutter applications and to get their applications published on the stores. All right, so now that we have discussed a lot of concepts, I know it's a lot to take. Don't worry. The team will share the recordings with y'all after this, so y'all can slowly watch it. In case if y'all miss certain components, certain elements of the workshop, don't worry. The team will share the recordings, so y'all can follow up later as well. I know it's a lot to take, but don't worry. We all are here to learn. So if there's any questions, please use the chat section so we can get things clarified. So before I move forward with the next segment, let me clarify certain questions which is there in the chat. So yeah, there's a question. In terms of easy way of AI integrations, what is your opinion about the bring your own API key approach specifically for AI cost reductions? So user can use his or her own API key while using the mobile app. Could this have some kind of a security challenge for Play Store? Right. Hi, Baha. Are you there? Is it possible to clarify? Maybe you can speak up and clarify what sort of a AI behavior you want to have if you're there.
Hello. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, thank you, first of all, for helping us. For example, yesterday I built authentication through Firebase, Google integration. So the person uses the logins the app with her, for example, Gmail, and later the app asks, could you please type your API key? And then it saves the API key, and then the user can ask some questions to the AI. For example, you mentioned about Gemini. For example, integrate Gemini, and it works okay, but I'm not sure if it is the good kind of option for cost reduction or for first MVP.
All right, a great question. Once again, I think it's a novel thing you're trying out. So you're trying to get the users bring your API key consent to the application where they can enter their API key and interact with the AI features of application. So here's the thing. Technically, it's possible. So technically sounding, it's completely possible because they can simply bring the API key and you can process that from the backend and provide whatever service. But here's the thing, there's this privacy guide from Google. So API key is something similar to our password, right? So in case if the API key is leaked, there will be a lot of issues that the person might face. So we had to make sure what sort of security mechanism we are placing to make sure the API key is well safe in our platform, right? because we can't store the API key as a plain text. Number one. The main reason is that in case if our database gets leaked, all of the API keys will be exposed to public and they will have rotated it, and sometimes they might be end up getting millions of bills in case if the API keys gets compromised. So that's a risk that you might take. So I would not advise, even though it's technically possible, to ask the user to bring the API key to the application and work with it. But in case if you're planning on storing the API key, it's a massive risk that you have to take. Sometimes you might even face legal consequences in case if something happens to your database. That's a massive risk that you might have to take out there. But if you're not taking the API key outside the application, but if you are making the agentic calls or whatever the AI agentic calls within the application itself, without taking the API key to your side, to your backend, then you're all good, right? Because the process happens within the application itself. Something like how VS Code works, right? So if you take VS Code, you can enter your own API key and that will work on behalf, right? So there's no backend processing. It's straight away your machine interacting with the server of Google. So that approach is fine, but it's a risk if you're storing any sort of API keys on your side.
Yeah.
Hope I answered the question.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't plan to kind of store the API key and then the backend, so Firebase. Just they are integrating the, let's say, Gemini through the mobile application, but I'm helping them to get the right prompts, AI prompts for specific questions.
All right.
Thank you very
All
much.
right. So in that case, I would say it's all right. So as long as you do the processing within the application itself, we are safe.
Thank you so much.
All right. You're welcome. All right. So the next question, wouldn't a capacitor or a wrapper be sufficient for iOS publishing? Hi, Arish. Could you elaborate the question a bit more if possible?
Yeah, so we have a web app made for our application. It was built in Cursor, and
Okay.
we used like a capacitor to wrap it up into like a package to be published on the App Store. So, like, I think Tuan mentioned that that would not be sufficient. So, are we required to build it in Swift completely? Just wanted to confirm that.
All right. So yes, Tuan, you can take out that question.
Yeah, Suresh, so I think Tuan is not here, so can you take is it?
Sure. All right, sure, definitely. So it's like this. So basically, technically, it's possible. Technically, building a wrapper for iOS is possible. So anyway, Google Play accepts. It's something to do with the policy. So Google Play, yeah. So technically, it's completely possible. You can build the application as a wrapper, as a web view. It's completely possible. But iOS rejects the application if they feel like it's a web view application. But you can completely use Google Play. Google Play allows you to publish WebView-based wrapper applications. That's not an issue, but iOS rejects it. So it's a policy concern. It's not something to do with the technical part. It's technically possible, but policy perspective, we have that issue for iOS. Yes.
So if we have like the code in Cursor and like I take it to Claude Code and tell it to convert to Swift, it that should be fine for
Completely
public.
fine. Yes.
Yeah. All right.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, can make sense. Thank you.
All right.
Also, one more thing,
Yeah,
if we have
sure.
time. Yeah. So there's a concern about Apple's UI. They have this new framework called Liquid Glass. Do we need to be compliant to that for this 45 days, or is that like a long-term thing?
No. Yeah, so good question once again. So liquid glass is actually optional to follow. So as you might have seen, a lot of applications even right now, liquid glass is a policy they are following within the operating system itself. But for applications, we really don't have to think of incorporating a liquid glass kind of a UI. You can stick, but make sure you are following the guidelines anyways. You don't have to stick to the liquid glass guidelines, but you can stick to the iOS's traditional guidance. For example, you can block several icons like the battery indicator, the time indicator, things like that. You can block, and the
Okay.
UI has to be very clean. And there should not be any sort of let's say cluttered UIs, cluttered icons, text, things like that you can't have. But make sure you read the UI guidelines of Apple when you're publishing. But liquid glass is something optional, so you can consider it for the long run. Anyways.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, welcome. Right. So let's move forward.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt, but I had one more question regarding the AI integration.
All right.
So I think for most of the part we were discussing about having AI agents like chatbots and stuff. But if we want to have more complex functionalities like generating some stories, text, or images within our app, like what would be the best option?
Generating images, right?
Yeah, images or like text.
What's the text stack you're using?
Gemini.
Gemini. All right. So anyway, like I mentioned, the GenKit supports all of these functionalities basically. The Firebase GenKit option. So they support text generation, they support image generation, and also they support audio generation as well. So I would say all the functionalities you mentioned are covered with Firebase GenKit. So that is a pretty good tool that you can use to get all of these things done.
Okay, thank you.
All right. All right. So anyways, let's quickly move forward with the slide deck, and let's quickly go through the concepts, the important things we should know when you're publishing the application. One thing is that handling assets, like I mentioned, always have SVGs, so you don't have to worry about, having massive scale pictures and cluttered images once you have the SVGs done. And then make sure the design is responsive. So responsive means the screen should adapt into multiple screen sizes. Could be a smaller screen, could be larger screens, could be tabs, could be desktops. So you can have responsive design in terms of building the layout basically. And finally, conversion tools, like I mentioned, there's this tool called Figma to code. So that supports you to convert your application code, the UI code into Figma, the Figma code into Flutter or React Native or even for HTML. So there are a lot of plugins that you all can use to convert your Figma design into code itself. So you can try all of these things. So that will help us to ease our lives in a better way. Right. So the requirements. So like I mentioned in the previous week also, the core requirement is to have 20 testers if you want to get the publication done on Google Play Store, right? So this is applicable for personal accounts, like I mentioned earlier in the previous week also. So we should always note these things in mind when you're publishing. So have a buffer time when you're publishing your applications on the store itself. Always have buffer time, and the 20 testers has to be there, and they should continuously test the application for 14 days. Don't worry, we're going to facilitate the 20 testers. The teams are here, so don't worry about it. And like I mentioned, the account has to be verified. So I believe all of you have the accounts by now. So that's a must to have. And for the Apple, we don't have any sort of guidelines like that, especially for testers. We don't have any guideline, but we should make sure our application is very clean and strict guidelines for functionality as well as UIs, right? We can't have any sort of broken functionalities for iOS. Like I mentioned earlier, strictly we should not have any sort of websites wrapped as applications. So it's a strict guideline Apple follows, but for Google, it does not apply. Yeah, so that's something we should note when you're publishing the applications on iOS. And review time is somewhere around 24 to 48 hours. So that's going to be the average review time for iOS applications. And like I mentioned, they are doing a very comprehensive review, right? So they are giving a detailed review, rejection, reason as well, because it's all human review they are doing. So even for Google, but iOS gives you a very detailed review when they do the application. So the pros and cons of applications, the bottlenecks, the broken pages, the broken links, to whatever it is. They are giving you a very comprehensive UI review. So accordingly, you can make the changes based on the review they are giving, basically. Right. So another important thing is to make sure our application has a proper unique name, right? Because we all have a unique address, right? We all have a unique address that is completely unique to all of us, right? So just like that, all of the applications on any store, even if it's Apple Store, even if it's Play Store, all of these applications are having a very unique name. So you might have seen if you access the Play Store in the URL corner, you might have seen there's something called com.application name dot some sort of domain kind of a unique name, right? So we should have a unique name as well. So my advice is to come up with a unique name is based on your domain name. For an example, just imagine your domain name is createtabs.com, right? So you have to inverse it. So you can take the com to the front, com.createtabs dot what are the application name. So you can reverse the domain name, and at the end, you can append your application name to the end, and you can come up with the complete bundle identifier. So in that way, you can make sure you will have a unique name in your Play Store, in the Apple App Store as well. So make sure you come up with a unique bundle identifier based on your domain name. So in that way, you can avoid any sort of duplicates, or you can avoid any sort of duplications based on this. And also make sure your application is going to have proper versioning as well. For an example, when you're numbering these applications, when you're adding version codes to these applications, we have a way of doing that, right? So there's something called minor, there's something called major, and there's something called patch, right? So major is actually a very major version you're releasing. So the version 1, version 2, something like that. Let's say this could be a major version of 1. Maybe in the future you might do version 2, maybe a complete revamp of the application. So that would be a major. And minor is a feature you are building, right? Let's say you are in the major version of 1, and let's say you are in the major version of 1 and you are building a feature on top of that. So what you do is basically we increment the minor version, which is there in the middle, to 1. And let's say we are building the second feature, then it can be 1.2.0, right? Let's say if you're applying a bug fix, right? So bug fix are known as the patch versions. So we increment the latter part of it. So 1.2.1, something like that. Let's say if you keep on fixing multiple bugs, you can actually keep on incrementing the patch version. So that's how you usually version these applications in the proper versioning order. So that is there. So you can follow the versioning standard by default. So don't put any random version numbers. Always follow the standard major, minor, and the patch. Right. Next steps for all of you, I would recommend start the project immediately. Like I mentioned earlier, having a Git repo is an advantage for all of you, right? So whenever something goes wrong, you can go behind and you can revert it, and you can make sure the versioning is there from day one itself. And whenever we want to release something, you can properly do the release, and you can team collaborate, right? So all of these things can be done with when you have a Git repo enabled. And database setup, like I mentioned, so you can have all of these things. And AI experimentations is, like I mentioned, you can try with the different tools I mentioned. You can try Cloud Code, Firebase Studio, Laravel, and we showed you multiple other AI tools. So you can try these tools whenever you want to build the application. And yeah, over to you, Tuan. If there's any
Okay, Suresh,
question.
I will continue from here. So can I share my screen?
All right, sure.
All right, so thanks Suresh and Tuan for that amazing session. And before we finish the workshop, let's have a quick look what you will be submitting for this week. So, all right. So from this week onwards, things become a little bit more personalized for each of you, right? So instead of having one common submission for everyone, your submissions will be actually depend on your own app and your own current progress. So we will be deciding what you need to work on during your weekly one-to-one sessions so that we can guide you based on where you are. And a quick reminder, if you haven't booked your one-to-one session yet, please make sure you do that as soon as possible after this workshop. And as a common submission for this week, what we are expecting from everyone is a simple written update. So you can just share what you have done within this week. All right. So yeah, this is the exit ticket for today's session. Just a quick honest test. The question is, how confident are you feeling about today's session about front end versus back end? Just take out your phone, scan the QR code, and let us know. Don't overthink it, and just go with your gut. All right, I'll give you a couple more seconds. Let me do this with you guys as well. All right, let's see the results. All right, I can see most of you are feeling very confident, which is great. And that means the concepts are starting to click, right? And for those of you who are somewhere in the middle or still a bit confused, don't worry. That is completely normal. And trust me, after your one-to-one sessions in this week, things will become much clearer and you will feel a lot more confident. All right. So before we finish, just one quick reminder about our next session. We will see you in workshop 4, where you will be focusing on testing, gathering feedbacks, and refining your MVP. And this session is all about improving your app and make sure it's ready for the next stage. And it will be happening on March 24th at the same time as today. So make sure you continue your work on MVP and attend your one-to-one sessions and come prepared to take your app into the next level. All right. So yeah, thank you so much everyone for joining today's session and hope to see you all in our one-to-one sessions in this week as well. So yeah, thank you again and over to you, Kama.
Thank you very much, Minette, Suresh, Tuan. Thank you very much, the three of you, for running the session, the workshop 3. And thank you all for being here today, especially those who were brave to ask their questions, to raise their hands and put it on the chat. Thank you, all of you, because as much question you ask, all of us much more we get insights from the session. So thank you all. And that's it. So I think that you have a little bit of homework to do. Take advantage of the one-to-one mentoring session as well. You have a full team of tech experts willing to help you. So please take advantage of that. And we will see you all again next Tuesday. So have a nice week. Bye, bye, bye. Thank you all.
Join me on this incredible journey. Until next time, happy learning.